Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Yorsz. I've been president of QinetiQ North America for the past 3.5 years. And getting on to my entry slide. So much like Ian and Greg before me, I'm also very excited to tell you a lot about what we're doing, what our strategy is, and the progress that we've made on that strategy to date. So at Q&A, one thing that we are definitely all about is products. We design, develop, and manufacture products that solve some of our customers' most challenging problems. So these are all generally very high value add products and generally speaking in the defense area as well. And it's been that way since we were founded back in 1956. And for a long period of that time too, we've been establishing ourselves with our customer base and getting our products out there. Over 4,500 of our Talon, Dragon, and Runner robots are now actively employed and have been sold around the world in areas such as maritime, which may be surprising to some people. We've been in there for working with customers for decades now, and I'll get into those later. A little bit of historical perspective too, just in terms of things that we've been dealing with from about 4 or 5 years ago is the drawdown from Iraq and Afghanistan, and the consequential drawdown of OCO funding as well as the fact that in the U.S. we were sold off, or the larger services group was sold off, so we'd had to replicate some of those services that we previously got. And I'm happy to report that over the last few years we have reversed that loss of revenue that we've gotten from the lack of OCO funding, and we are now back onto a growth path over the past couple of years, much like the larger QinetiQ group too. So it's something that we're very pleased with, and I would say that we've done that through a few different routes. One was certainly a focus on just financially, not only year over year, but quarter over quarter steady growth, which we have been accomplishing in terms of meeting our goals. We've looked at our product portfolio and reformed that somewhat. We've also worked very hard on refreshing our product portfolio and refreshing the contacts that we've had with our customers and creating some new ones there. And that's all had a very good result for us going forward, to the point where now we have a diversified portfolio, yes, but also very focused in the markets that we're in. So we're getting a lot of opportunity going forward, and I'll tell you about some of that in the future. What we've also got in terms of capability, about 300 people spread over manufacturing, design, development, and with a lot of capability there. We handle everything from cradle to grave when it comes to a product, so that's the full life cycle of the product, including all of the O&M that comes afterwards as well. In terms of those product areas, we have 3 major ones. The first one, which is about 45% of our business, is the unmanned ground systems. So that contains all of the robotics, including the small and larger robots, and for the unmanned ground vehicles, that includes what we call our RAC kits, or our teleoperated control kits that we modify vehicles to adapt to so that people can operate them remotely. We also contain in this area our accessories, which includes those teleoperation kits and the controllers that work them. The next business area that we have is survivability, and that primarily consists of what we have for air armor, so it's an add-on air armor technique, as well as our RPG net protection systems called QNet, and the armor is called Last Armor, and that's about 20% of our business. And finally is the maritime business, and that's roughly about 30%. That includes, as our major product area, really the EMALS and AAG work that we do for General Atomic, and as a partner with General Atomics, and that's the electromagnetic launch and the electromagnetic recovery systems that we sell onto the Ford-class aircraft carriers. So we don't actually do the entire system, we do the control system. And that all fits in nicely with one of our major capabilities, which is the command and control of electromagnetic systems in general, motors, actuators, etc. So not only do we have that product and product line, but we also have a number of complementary products that we're starting to add now, including the Dolphin communications technology, as well as what we have as a small A-size UUV called Sea Scout. So I would say that we are product focused, and yeah, we're also quite well aligned with the general group strategy. In fact, that is one of our focuses, to be aligned with the general group strategy. And our major concentration, of course, is in the U.S., and as part of that U.S. alignment and going after what is the largest defense budget in the world, we are helping to support the international efforts that QinetiQ Group has as a whole. The strategy within those areas are a little bit varied for each of the three business areas that I mentioned. So within the unmanned ground systems, obviously we want to maintain the kind of product share that we have in some of the smaller robotics. We're also working very hard on increasing what's become an increasingly important part of the US government's focus, which is control of larger vehicles. It's an area that's gone from a lot of S&T into some serious fielding of systems at this point, or at least getting ready for that. So that's an area that we're also focusing on. In the survivability marketplace, we're looking at, again, refreshing a lot of the products that we have in there to maintain what is really quite a dominance in that niche of aftermarket aircraft armor. And also we are the largest provider of the RPG net protection systems in the world, and we're working hard to make sure that stays that way. And finally, of course, in the maritime area, as I mentioned, we're moving out from not only the product line of EMALS and AAG, but really turning that into a full business area that we're leveraging our experience from the EMALS and AAG and building some very high reliability equipment out into the full marketplace now. So a new area where we're starting to get a lot of attraction there. Outside of the United States, obviously we have for quite some time been selling product, primarily the robotic systems into the world market, and that's still a big part of our business. It still accounts for somewhere between 8 to 15% of our revenue on any given year, so it's something that we still continue to do. And it's an area that we've actually worked a decent amount with QinetiQ, selling into the UK market, as well as we're looking forward to working with the JVs and selling into the Middle East. So that's those areas that we're looking to get much stronger in. And in terms of innovation, we have been working very hard on getting new products, new product areas. It's a point of emphasis for QinetiQ. So things like Dolphin technology, things like what we're doing with the robotic systems that we've worked very hard to improve, and I'll give you a few examples of that coming up, are all part of where we're spending a good deal of our discretionary funds. Q&A leadership. So as I mentioned, I've been around for about 3.5 years now. In terms of leadership, this is leadership that's actually fairly new to Q&A itself, generally all within the last 3 years or so. But a leadership team that has a lot of experience out in the industry and has been dealing with the defense industry for many, many years now, and you can see from your packets that that's true. They also have a lot of experience in product-focused industries, so they're very well aligned with how Q&A is working right now. Our capabilities in the business areas that we've selected to focus on are no accident. They're very well aligned with where the U.S. and many other countries are going too in terms of defense. In the US, one of the big drivers these days is near-peer issues, and so that's driving a lot of the focus of the defense budget. One of those areas in particular that comes into play often is the focus on autonomy and semi-autonomy, and a great quote from General Milley that basically says, in the future, everything that kind of walk, crawls, or flies is going to have some level of autonomy or semi-autonomy in it. That links up very well with what we do in a number of our business areas. So, for instance, in the unmanned ground systems, some of the drivers there, of course, are soldier safety, when it comes to handling IEDs, when it comes to doing ISR, so intelligence and surveillance, getting the soldier out of that. But it's also much more than that too. It's also about leverage and about force multiplication. So basically, if one soldier can control many different vehicles or many different robots, that takes one person and multiplies them up to a force of many. So when they're doing convoys or when they have anything related to weaponized robotics, that's another point of focus within the U.S. And that's especially applying these days, as I mentioned, to the larger vehicles as well. So things like the next generation combat vehicle, where there will be over the next 5 years at least $1 billion worth of RDT&E going into that, is a big point of focus. And I'll go into later how the the win that we just had on the Yorsz program positions us very well to get into that marketplace. In survivability products, it's all about protecting the people and the assets, as always, and the unique capabilities that our armor and QNets have, position us very well to get into those marketplaces. In the maritime area, again, a lot of it, both near-peer and the autonomy issues come into play. But there's, in terms of Ford carriers, there's a plan for Ford carriers, at least 10 going out to GFY 48. It's a long time, and also adding another 80 ships by that point in time. So that gives us a lot of opportunity to have a nice, steady income from the EMALS and AHE work. It also gives us great opportunities to get into some of the refurbishment and the new ships that they're planning on putting out in that time frame. There's also a directive on having subsea dominance and communication, and that greatly that just ties right into what we're doing in our Dolphin technology, as well as our Sea Scout UUV technology. So let's focus a little bit on the separate business areas. In terms of unmanned ground systems, so as I mentioned, we have an established base of over 4,500 of these units out in the field right now. And that gives us a great deal of base and customer interface to work from. We've also, in the past, years in the past, provided the Minotaur systems to the government that controls some, for robotic control of some larger vehicles, larger minesweepers. So what have we done since over the past few years to help get us into a position? Well, we've worked very hard on revitalizing the products that we have out there right now, both the Talon and our smaller Dragon Runner, which we've come out with a new backpackable version of that. We've made all of our robots now are IOP compliant, which is the government is looking for. So that's an interactive and operability type of constraint that the government puts on it, so that you can easily add on different components. And speaking of components, we've also added on the ability to manufacture add-ons for CBRNE, so chemical, biological types of instruments, and those have also been selling well and been keeping our larger robotic products fresh over time. We've increased the mobility. We've added on better video. We've made them lighter. And we've also made them more cost effective too, which has been a point of emphasis in the government as well. So we've worked very hard on the smaller robots, on the larger, again, on the larger rack kits that control the vehicles. We've invested in both partnerships and our ability to do autonomous and semi-autonomous systems, as well as the hardware that actually provides it. And that's one of the big reasons that we were able to go out and win that ARSYS contract. So speaking of that and results, we have in fact had some good results as of late, winning the ARSYS $44 million contract with further follow-on opportunities, by the way. So that is for a teleoperated mine removal and interrogation equipment that goes on to a Hemi type of vehicle. And there's definitely opportunities that are palmed in for more vehicles on the ARSYS Type 1. There's also an ARSYS Type 2 that is for a different and larger type of vehicle, the RG31. There's programs, other mine sweeping programs such as HMDS, which push some mine sweeping capability on a Husky. So directly in line with what we just won is a great stepping stone to getting into a much larger marketplace. And then there's the indirect benefits of that in terms of how it positions us to get into the next generation combat vehicle that includes both, an optionally manned and a complete remote control vehicle too. And that is that, as I mentioned, is going to be a multi-billion-dollar program when it comes into play. So all good stepping stones for us. We were also able to win the phase one, the EMD phase of CRISI, which is ultimately destined to manufacture thousands of the smaller type of robots, smaller backpackable type of robots, and with a government estimate of $429 million. So that's a very large program. And then we were also selected as one of the participants in the CRIS-H, a heavy robot program. So something that's over 500, a larger, many 100-pound robot that has other capabilities associated with it for various larger carrying missions. So I think we've had a good run actually over the past couple of months. We did lose the MITRS program, but we still have with Talon many channels for selling into the DoD that don't rely on that particular program of record. So and of course there are many other R&D types of programs that are available to us too, and we do actually do a number of CRAD programs which help kind of tie us into the customer and give us a lot of opportunity going forward. So on survivability products, it's an area that we have a very established position. We're on roughly 40 different type of aircraft. We sold 1,600 onto 1,600 of these planes over time, and we continue to have a very large kind of dominating presence in this marketplace. Also, I mentioned the QNets. We've sold over 13,000 of these, primarily into the U.S. marketplace. So we are definitely the dominant player when it comes to RPG protection from passively controlled nets. What have we been doing, in that area? Well, we've been working very hard on improving the armor. We've made it over 50% lighter. We've also gone back and spent a good deal of time, reconnecting with some customers as well. And in terms of the RPG net protection systems, we've spent a lot of time on redesigning things like the frame to make it more applicable to our customer needs, as well as spending a lot of time on the next generation using some advanced materials for RPG protection. And where's this all led to? Well, we've been able to continue some very good, steady sales in the armor area and start to grow on them as well. And we've been able to get onto new platforms. We've been able to retrofit new kits onto old platforms. And in one of our major customers in this area, Lockheed Martin, over the past couple of years, we've received what they call their top 2% award. So we were in their top 2% of over 1,400 suppliers that Lockheed Martin has. So it's a very important award for us to win, and clearly one that not a lot of people do. In terms of QNet sales, we have seen somewhat of an uplift there. Obviously, either of these things, the armor and the QNet, can have definite benefits in terms of any ongoing conflict. So we do have some possibilities in other parts of the world for selling the armor, and we are pursuing them. In terms of maritime systems, again, I mentioned we primarily have been selling, EMALS and AAG equipment into General Atomics. We do all the controllers, but we've been doing much more than that over time now. We've also started to develop what we call the Dolphin communications technology. So it's a new technique that we've had out there for a couple of years that allows for full duplex communication, basically allows for networked communication, and especially underwater. And an A-sized UUV that can be used for a number of applications, various payloads that we can add on, including various ISR platforms, and it can also act as essentially as an undersea target for submarine training too. So we have done that, and that's resulted in, you've seen the announcements on CVN. Well, we've been out there on CVN 78. We've made the announcement on CVN 79 and 80. So we continue to provide those control systems. We are, by the way, also trying to make sure that we leverage our capabilities within our own company, so that we're building some modular systems in a very cost-effective way that can be leveraged from our small to large robots and across our businesses, from the ground systems into the undersea systems as well. And that's resulted in some good opportunities and some good sales for us. We've continued to sell EMALS. We've announced a Dolphin contract from the Naval Underwater Warfare Center to improve, it's designed to improve some sonar capabilities. We have a contract with EB on cradle locks deployment for the Virginia-class subs. So we are active in terms of getting programs to do upgrades to the ships, as I'd mentioned before. So we are doing, and we continue to do, technology insertion and new program development. So I guess I would say in conclusion that we believe we are well positioned. We've worked hard to reinvigorate our technologies, our business development capabilities, our facilities in order to handle a growth business. And we think that we're seeing a number of good opportunities to pursue in the future. And that's it. Any questions?
Hi, thank you. It's Daniel Cunley from Liberum. You talked quite a lot about products and product renewals. Can you just give some color on sort of the product advantages you've been referring to, in particular over peers like Endeavour for the small robots, in reference to QinetiQ, and how you could actually leverage those robot products outside of the US market as well? Thanks.
Sure. So, I think historically there's a few things I feel like we do well. I think we have great contact with our customers, and so we're leveraging our customer base, and we have, put in some designs and tweaks that are very focused toward what the customer is looking for. I think we've also got a long history and very good reliability in our products. So I don't know how to necessarily leverage that against or do a direct comparison on some of our other competitors, but I think that from a reliability and our ability to perform the type of service that the customer is looking for, I think we do very, very well, and continue to do that. And we've been part of the interoperability standard committees that I mentioned. We were part of that. We were really one of the first members on that, and we've been a large contributing member ever since. So we make sure we're very well aligned with the customer. We sell a very high reliability product. In terms of distinguishing on the small robots, we're still in a competition, so I really can't say too much about that. I'm sorry, what you had another...
Just the ability to leverage sort of such products outside of the US markets. Thanks.
Yeah, well, we, as I mentioned, we still, it's still a significant portion of our revenue to sell those products outside of the US. Again, a lot of the things that the customers outside the US appreciate are the reliability. We have been selling them through the home market. We have been selling with the support of QinetiQ in the UK. And to a very favorable outlook from those customers. So I think the development and the acceptance of our products from within the U.S. customer have absolutely helped us sell outside of the U.S.
Richard Staveley from Majetti. Just wanted to ask you about the QinetiQ program again. Can I just understand what the value of the first stage is? Also, what sales per year that will be contributing to the division, and also what percentage of the rest of it could you and should you expect to win, and over how many years would that program be? Well,
so it's a winner-take-all competition. So it's not a percentage. It's either you win the next phase or you don't. I will say though that regardless of that, there are many channels to sell into the DoD, of which QinetiQ is a big one, but certainly only one of them too. So the value of the first phase, we announced that publicly, was around $10 million. And then for the next phases, that will be, the government has publicly come out with a number of up to $429 million. The decision point on that is going to happen sometime over the next few months, and so we could start seeing revenue for that in the last quarter of this year. Did I say something?
No, I was just going to say, how many years is that $400 million number over?
I don't know exactly. I believe it's over about 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, thanks so much.
So if you win, it would add 50% roughly to your sales for the next few years.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you just do the math, I mean, again, it's up to that number. So the ramping and how many they order is still remains to be seen. But it's certainly a large value program.
Yeah, I think I'd be cautious doing that. I mean, you're talking about a government budget. Some of that budget will be used for direct procurement to whoever wins. Some of that budget will be done for other things. Whether they'll spend that budget or not is another matter. So I would just be cautious about that. I think we need to win the competition first, and then obviously we'll declare what benefits it will bring.
Thank you. I think thinking about unmanned ground vehicles, there are the large programs, but also the accessories. Can you talk about things like controllers, or you talked about the ARSIS program? Are there additional large opportunities that QinetiQ can supply equipment to unmanned ground vehicles?
Sure. Well, I mean, you're asking kind of. I mentioned like next generation combat vehicle and all the work that. So any vehicle that is looking, any larger vehicle that's looking to either be automated in some tele-operated or semi-autonomous way, we can contribute to that. And as you can see from the quotes that I mentioned, that's absolutely exactly where the U.S. government and many other governments are moving, because that's where a lot of our near peers are moving as well. So any type of automated vehicle is an area that we can contribute. Other areas, mentioned them. So the new types of controllers, any type of man-machine interface along those lines, and we have them for our own robots, obviously, but yes, there is actually opportunity to sell them for other people's robots too, and we are doing right now some work with the government under some CRAD type of operations to put us in a position to potentially do that. We have all of the Cyberni sensors that we have, so this whole world of IOP actually kind of creates a system where you can plug things on fairly easy. So we are absolutely exploring the opportunity in some of those areas to be able to be a provider of things that get plugged on. But the Cyberni sensors is another one where we have already developed that and have been selling them into the government. Another area, of course, that's starting to come into play is weaponized robotics, and we provided the Mars system previously to the Marines as well, and so we're a player there too.
And on survivability, is QNet and the airborne armor all OCO funding, or is it some of it actually part of programs of record?
They're not really. No, I wouldn't say that they're programs of record. Much of it, as I mentioned, is just some either recapitalization or new planes are coming out, and so they're getting added on. So it's not per se larger programs of records, as much as just the normal production cycles on some of these aircraft. Same for it's mostly recapitalization on the QNets, although we do have some good opportunities coming up on that.
Thanks.
Hi, thanks. At the beginning of your presentation, you used the word diversified product portfolio, and probably unfair because before your time, previous management talked a lot about diversifying the product portfolio. So slightly playing devil's advocate here, we see exactly the same names several years down the line. So I guess how maybe you could explain the strategy behind where you see developing that portfolio. So if you could talk to that point. And secondly, are these product businesses obviously very different to the rest of the group in many respects because they are products? Are the businesses integrated? Do you integrate the businesses? Is there any sort of operating integration, development, strategy, R&D? I mean, how should we think about the collection of businesses in Q&A?
So when you say how to think about the collection of businesses in Q&A relative to the larger group or within Q&A itself?
I guess I'm kind of referring, so we know robots, we know the original bit where the original business was. Is that just still a standalone business that just does robots, or is there some kind of R&D center or
sure.
those kind of things?
So there's a lot of sort of stuff that goes behind the scenes, let's say, that has changed over time. And one of the things that we have done, in fact, at Q&A, that goes more to functional operation, is to not have these things be as much standalone businesses, but in fact to have them more part of an integrated company, so that within Q&A, for instance, we wouldn't have been able to bid and win the number of programs that we have done had we had them as truly standalone, siloed businesses. So actually, much like what's going on substantially within the larger group too, we have also tried to leverage the capabilities within the company and flow the resources where they're needed. So developing things like the QinetiQ robot was something that we utilized a lot of resources on from around the entire company. And then I mentioned that we're actually trying to modularize much more. So rather than have a point product, and 5-point product robots that are out there. We're trying to develop modules that can be utilized between all of those robots, but not only within the robots within that business unit, but also within the underseas systems too, so that we can develop that technology and use it on things like Sea Scout, our A-sized UUV that we have going as well. So, there's a lot more, I think, sharing of resources and efficient utilization of those resources going on than's ever happened before. You don't sort of see that from the outside, but it happens on the inside. The second thing is when you talk about diversity, I'd say one of the big areas of focus that we have is improving, is on the maritime business area. And that's an area where we're seeing steady growth in the sales. We plan, and we've had some really nice wins there lately. And we're planning on even more growth of that in the future too. So yeah, I'm not sure. I can't respond to what you've heard before about diversification, but it's it's as I mentioned, it's diversification without being diffused and defocused, because it is quite well focused, within those product areas, and making better products and more efficiently.
And just one last one on CRISI. I mean,
Yep.
it's a big opportunity. What should we? Is this just an upside opportunity in terms of the plan and the general guidance that we talk about in our market?
Well, let's see. Maybe I'll look at David on this one.
It is upside for the plan. We're not assuming that in any guidance that we've given so far, but clearly it's something we're working extremely hard on trying to win.
So just on that, on that last point, can you talk to us about how you're bidding this contract differently in order to give yourself a better chance of winning it relative to, I forget the name of the first contract that that you didn't win. What are you doing differently? Because obviously there was a big cost component of the first contract that you maybe missed or sort of weren't as focused on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll get input from other people. My short answer would probably be no, because we're in an active competition. So I'm really not going to say, anything about our competitive strategy as far as that goes. But if Steve or David want to say anything,
I agree, Jeff. It's a highly competitive program. We're in a public forum. We're on a webcast.
I think it's true that we've used the opportunity to really refresh the approach that we take. I'm sure we will be highly competitive.
Obviously, the U.S. business is very product focused, and are there any opportunities like in the Australian business or UK business more on sort of the testing and evaluation or sort of LTPA type businesses? And then maybe a broader question is, how does the product business fit in terms of the larger group in terms of the strategically, and how does it feed into some of the other businesses like the Australian business in terms of, is there synergies across these two groups, or maybe, is the product business something that, could be in a separate business, or, some comments on that?
So there are a few answers there. I mean, there's a bunch of questions sort of wrapped up. I would say that certainly from a larger product or larger group alignment, that is, as I mentioned at the beginning, that is clearly one of the focuses that we have to be part of the larger group. And Ian talked about leveraging, that kind of product distribution into other RDT&E opportunities. And in fact, even with the in the areas that we're in, we see some of those opportunities now, and at a group level, in a coordinated level, we are developing a strategy to do exactly that. So yes, I mean the short answer to a lot of what you're saying is yes. I think there is a role for the products and leveraging products into the RDT&E that exists within the U.S. And there were a bunch of things kind of wrapped up in there. Actually, I'll ask Steve maybe to.
I mean, personally, I think it's a great question. It's a question we're working on a lot as we're 2 years into a new strategy, and we're elaborating the definition of our strategy as a living way of running the company as we move forward. And I think that you all have heard this afternoon a lot about leverage, how we actually leverage and think in integrated ways, because that's where we'll yield competitive advantage in the markets that we're offering. So, I mean, maybe the best way of answering your question, if you take a service like test and evaluation, then think through what's in the value chain of test and evaluation. Targets are part of delivering the test evaluation service. They're also a product, and by definition, a target has to be a very low-cost product. And what is a target? It's an autonomous robot system. So there's direct leverage in terms of business and engineering thinking about how you go from low-cost targets into robotics. And that's just one simple thread, because I often get the question about, are we services or are we products? And I think to a degree we need to stop thinking like that and think more about our customers and how we leverage capabilities across services and products. And that's probably the most powerful example of thinking of capability. T&E service, target, which is service and product, and robotics. And then when you overlay some of the customer opportunities that we see, whether they're in, I would go US, Canada, number of European countries, Middle East, Australasia, our strategy is to find those connections, think about them in an integrated way, be very thoughtful and then precise in how we invest in those, whether it's organic or if it's a capability gap that we can get there quicker through inorganic. That is the QinetiQ strategy. That's the QinetiQ thought process. That's actually going to drive our growth. That's exactly what we're doing. And to the other part of your point, does that backwash to some point that we're going to do something different in the United States at some point? The answer is possibly yes, but it will be done in a very thoughtful, strategy-led way where we're confident that we're going to get really good return on investment.
And by the way, answering just a very narrow part of your question, certainly there are opportunities for us to take advantage of how we work together. Some of my guys were down in Australia just last week, actually meeting with Greg. I mentioned we sell into the UK with some of our robotic systems already, and that's greatly aided by the QinetiQ group. Ian and I talk all the time about the JVs, and we're working toward leveraging those up too. And in fact, another good example of sort of cross cooperation is on these smaller UUVs that I mentioned, the A-size UUVs. A lot of the hydrodynamics work was done by engineers here in the UK who have that level of resource capability. So we are definitely, even if that's sort of that narrow answer to your question, leveraging each other's capabilities right now today.
And maybe we've still got a bit of time. I mean, we've seen the overall international strategy. You've seen Australia, you've seen US. Are there any broader questions? If we open up the floor and we sort of go back on all three presentations, really.
Jonathan Roberts from EFG Asset Management. Can you talk about the real challenges and in the different tiered markets of leveraging the investment in the UK platform and selling into those markets? What is the barrier to accelerate the growth?
Maybe you need to answer as well because you're on the front line doing this every single day. Yeah, my first answer would go to experienced, qualified business leaders with the right customer relationships. If you go back to when we launched this strategy, we talked about 4 big areas of change that we were focusing on. And one of the big areas was what I call business winning. And we've invested heavily in business winning. And business winning is, it's not a commodity business. This is a very thoughtful business. It's a very thoughtful customer that's got very considered threats, and therefore it requires people that really understand those dynamics of threats and also can work through the organisation to leverage the various capabilities that we're talking about. We've done really well. We've recruited a senior leadership team. I think we've recruited of the order of 30 plus very high quality business development managers across the group in the last few years. But as we grow and as we enter more of these markets, the more people that we need in the relevant territories that actually understand those customer dynamics. So I don't know where you would go, but I would go there as my number one sort of route to market priority. And it can't be something you can just do tomorrow. You've got to do that in a thoughtful, planned manner.
I was just going to build on that by saying I think one of our biggest challenges in terms of moving at pace is our customers actually understanding what they need. It's easy to buy a capability. It's different to actually then be able to have the people and the expertise to be able to deploy it to service and achieve the capability it can deliver. So a lot of customers don't know what good looks like, and I think that's the real advantage that we can bring as customer friends with the expertise we have, with the world-class capability we have in the UK. We can actually demonstrate to customers what good looks like, and we can help them through that journey. But I think when it comes moving at pace, I think that's one of the biggest things that holds us back, is customers don't really necessarily always understand their requirements and the pace at which they need to be able to make decisions to achieve those capabilities they really need. But we can help them in that journey, being that independent partner for them.
Thank you. Am I right in thinking that the European Defence Agency has been trying to build a database of test and evaluation facilities and trying to get greater use of certain facilities across Europe, or has that died a death, or is that I'm thinking madly on that front?
Go ahead.
I think there has been studies of that type, and that's probably normal within a European Defence Agency. You'd pick a particular capability domain, and you'd understand the relevant, the relative, competencies, strengths and weaknesses, and you'd see whether you can federate it. So I believe they have done the study. I don't believe that we are privy to the full results. But I think where I would go would be a slightly different point. Do I long term see European test and evaluation, and I'm talking long term, as part of the company's forward strategy? The answer is yes, because I absolutely believe that no nation will be able to fully afford all of the state-of-the-art modern capabilities that they will need for all capabilities, military and security capabilities. So some level of industrialization, some level of sharing. We already have it to a degree in the T&E marketplace across Europe, as you see. I mean, I think I put up on the slide France and other countries like Turkey coming and using our facility. And I think we will see more of that, and I think that will create long-term opportunities. But I'm talking very much in the long term, beyond the here and now, let's say, politics of the moment.
So one question you also mentioned, I can't remember who did it at the beginning of the presentation, digitization, and how that is going to affect, presumably, the tests and evaluation offering. So how are you investing in it? What does it mean for QinetiQ is the first question. A lot of talk in industry, obviously, about the advantages and opportunities in manufacturing and services. So how does that look for QinetiQ is the first question.
Yeah, again, it's one of our sort of strategic investment topics, because I think any industry thinks that the way of doing its business is going to be static for the next 10 to 20 years is pretty flawed. So I think that the simple phrase that I would use, what do we mean by digitization, just like you referred to the fourth industrial revolution that's going to or is hitting manufacturing, we think there's an equivalent for test and evaluation. So what do I mean by that? There will always be a place for large-scale facilities, ranges, to do some of the capability testing that is undertaken. But the nature of that testing, the fact that testing could be moving around to different locations, so you need mobility, you need different forms of simulation, you need different forms of injecting threats. You need different ways of maybe doing your testing in a distributed manner, so you're connecting, distributed geographic locations. I think, these are just examples. You need to digitize it further into the upstream product development cycle, so you end up doing, less physical testing, at the back end. I think these are all modernization techniques around test and evaluation. And we see it as a core part of our business. If this is the core, and I remind you that we see the future of QinetiQ, we want to be a global leader in setting the pace and delivering these type of services around the world. We've got to invest in the most state-of-the-art methods of doing it. And that's what we mean.
One question on cyber and sort of information services type offerings. So in the US, the landscape's changed drastically in the last few years with some of the big guys and the sort of government information service providers, something in kind of Leidos and CSRA, and there's a recent a deal this week, actually. So does that marketplace interest QinetiQ? It's quite a UK-orientated cyber business, or is it?
I mean, my mind goes to link your last two questions, because state-of-the-art modern warfare is not all just about what's physical. It's very much about what's physical, what's virtual, and what is cyber. And therefore being able to have the mastery of the right levels of cyber skills and cyber testing is integral to the modernization of what we probably all have got in our minds as something that's a very physical interpretation of what test and evaluation is. So do we see cyber as an integral part to our core strategy and part of modernizing test and evaluation? The answer is yes. We're on time. I really do hope that you found that useful this afternoon. I mean, we really would welcome feedback on this type of seminar. We chose international because it's an integral part of our company strategy. It's absolutely delivering growth already, and it's going to contribute substantial growth to the company in the years ahead. So I really do hope you found that useful. Please let us know, because if you didn't, we won't do another seminar, but if you did, we might do another seminar. I think if there are three takeaways, I would remind you, our ambition is very high. We absolutely believe as a team we can grow this company to 50-50 in a 5 to 10 year basis. That ambition is high. Secondly, that we've made progress in the first 2 years, shifting a company that's reversed decline and grown in 2 years to also move from 21 to 27% in a very thoughtful and considered way, I think is really good progress. And hopefully, in terms of my third point, you've seen today actually a lot more understanding of what is going in our two primary home countries outside of the UK, US and Australia, and how we are thinking as a company in terms of leverage. So that really does present QinetiQ and its shareholders with significant growth opportunities. So I hope you found it valuable.